as you're solving problems around your technology, it's important to differentiate between science problems and engineering problems. Engineering problems have a very well-known path to solution. You can put a budget around it and a schedule. You can plan for that financially. Science problems, on the other hand, don't work that way. The solution might be a day away or it might be 5 years.
Welcome to the X Factor, where we visit with proven private equity leaders to unpack a compelling area of value creation to help our listeners gain an edge as they grind toward a liquidity event of their own. X Factor is presented by Private Equity CXO, the world's largest digital community of PE-backed executives. You can find a link to PECXO in the description to start your free membership and unlock exclusive content. I'm your host, Rob Huxtable, a partner at Falcon, a retained executive search firm exclusively recruiting C-level leaders for private equity-owned portfolio companies. Let's welcome Matt Thomas, who is an experienced CEO with tech-enabled and software businesses in the energy, utility, and industrial space. Matt, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Rob. Glad to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, my pleasure. And we're going to get into a topic which I think is a variation of a broader theme, which is that a lot of things that get done to create value in private equity-owned companies are pretty well known. The playbooks are pretty well established, but it's how well can those be executed and implemented, and can we take advantage of every opportunity and fully pull that lever even at the margins? So doing everything a little bit better, with a little bit more consistency. So we're going to get into how to fully optimize your business with technology. And it won't matter if you're in a software company, a tech-enabled business, or a services or manufacturing company that uses tech in the background. We'll touch on a lot of insights that you all can consider putting into practice at your portcos. So with that said, Matt, give us a quick summary of your background and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I'm an engineer by training, have been in executive leadership roles in tech firms for the last 20 years or so. My most notable experience as CEO was with a company called JP3. We're in the energy space, data analytics, hardware, software, cloud-based systems to provide real-time composition of oil and natural gas as it flows through the pipeline. So I was recruited in to lead that company by its investors. We built it from the ground up to 15, 20 million in revenue, with a good portion of that recurring. And then we were fortunate enough to be able to sell that right before COVID. And so we sold it to a New York Stock Exchange traded company called Flowtech out of Houston. So I've also been CEO of a venture-backed firm in the LED space, or clean tech venture. And then most recently, I actually shifted gears and went to a much larger firm called Century in the utility construction space, where I was the chief innovation officer. So leading all aspects of technology implementation, recruitment, and selection of our enterprise-wide software platforms, everything all the way down to the help desk. So a broad array of experiences on the tech side there as well.
Okay, terrific. So we know that technology matters in private equity, but what's your take on tech as it relates to being an avenue to accelerate transformation?
Sure. I think there's a couple of different ways we can look at that question, Rob. The first, of course, is really around the core technology of the private equity backed business itself, right? And so going all the way back to the beginning of venture and PE, there's usually been a technology component that sets the company apart. I was fortunate enough to have Jimmy Trabig, the founder of Tandem Computing, on my board at Illumitex. And, he was the founder and CEO of Tandem Computing, one of the first darlings of the Silicon Valley VC world, funded by Kleiner Perkins. And so I've been exposed to and learned from those stories and sort of seen how technology has evolved over time. Obviously, today it's all about AI and Gen AI and what the impact is going to be on our businesses. But all the way through at JP3, at Illumitex, every place that I've been, there's a core technology that's fundamental to the business. That's something that won't change as we go forward. One lesson I did learn along the way related to that is, as you're solving problems around your technology, it's important to differentiate between science problems and engineering problems. Engineering problems have a very well-known path to solution. You can put a budget around it and a schedule. You can plan for that financially. Science problems, on the other hand, don't work that way. The solution might be a day away or it might be 5 years. I saw that at Applied Science Fiction, which was another venture-backed company where I was head of marketing, where we were solving science problems and thought they were engineering problems, and it really hurt the company. So I think that's one aspect of how technology can impact. But the other way is just in how those P-backed businesses are actually run from a day-to-day perspective. And I think this is where many companies can make mistakes by thinking that there's some magic tool that they need to adopt that will transform their business financially. And in reality, that's not the case. It actually becomes a pain point within the company. If you look at JP3, we actually needed our manufacturing system internally. We actually chose to build our own on top of a very simple platform using Jira and a system of APIs that would allow us to interface with our ERP system. Very straightforward. It was fully configurable. It didn't cost a lot of money, and it served us well all the way through our growth pathways. If you look at the flip side of that, at Century, we had implementations of tools that were, for example, SAP on the ERP side, where the tool was extremely complex and costly. Obviously, SAP is very powerful, but it's really not needed for most companies, especially at the private equity back level. Even something like Salesforce, which is fairly straightforward to implement, may not be the right tool if your customer base is quite small. We actually had Salesforce implemented at JP3, and then we realized that we weren't getting the full value of all of the various components and capabilities of that tool. And what we really needed was a very simple customer management tool because we're only calling on 50 or 60 customers at a time. I think you have to be very careful because the allocation of scarce resources can quickly take you down a path that becomes distracting. So one of the key things for making a private equity backed company successful is maintaining that laser focus on what is our core value, what value we're bringing to the marketplace. So if those technology tools can help you achieve that goal, great. Otherwise, Excel is a perfectly valid tool for most companies.
It does make me kind of wonder about the countless occasions where I've been on a search, and one of the issues at the portfolio company is that the ERP implementation did not go according to plan, and it is punitive, and sort of the solution is ongoing. And it's always been interesting to me because private equity should know how to implement an ERP at this point in the game. It's happened, countless times. But maybe what you're getting at is maybe there's over solutioning happening, and businesses that are of a certain complexity are trying to adopt an excessively complex tech solution.
It's a tricky problem, Rob, because as the business scales, you go from 0 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to a billion. You do need different tools, and you do have different constraints if you're private or public. And so you have to constantly be moving along that evolutionary curve of your software platforms. The problem comes in that you take a jump and you jump, maybe leapfrog a couple of steps that you ought to take in between. ERP systems are notorious for that, right? Just a quick example at Century, we had a company that we bought that was doing 100 million in revenue, and they were still running on QuickBooks. So QuickBooks is a fine tool. 100 million is a little high for its capabilities, but so we had to make that transition, and it was very painful to go straight from QuickBooks into SAP. It took many more months than it should have. And so when we were getting ready to do our next transition of an ERP system, we were a larger company. Century's a $3 billion operation with 13,000 employees. So I actually brought in EY, used them as a consulting firm to come alongside my team and sort of oversee and make sure that we're following best practices. And I had not done an SAP implementation myself, and so I needed them to ensure me that we were in fact following those best practices. At the end of the day, though, fundamentals are important, right? And so something as simple as, how do we define success when we implement an ERP system? Let's have that checklist. Let's have our go, no go charts. Let's have all of our checkpoints. Those things make a big difference. You can be that prescriptive even in a small company, right? You just have to follow the fundamental disciplines of software implementation that you would use for any other system.
So, any other keys when you're thinking about assessing the right tech solution, be it for a platform you already are running or an add-on acquisition you're considering?
You should be able to put together an ROI analysis on any technology platform that you're thinking of adopting. There should always be a financial framework that you're using to understand what's this going to bring to the table, what are our ongoing costs going to be, what are our next best alternatives, and so that's what we've done. Yeah, I've done that almost every step of the way. Again, in some cases, there's so many smaller and growing technology platforms out there now that you can use a system like Miro or Monday.com, that which has now grown significantly, but you can get a lot of what you need in incremental pieces. One of the things that I preached at Century was the days of a monolithic, one-stop shopping system to solve all of your problems are long behind us. So the solutions now are oftentimes you pick the fit for purpose solution for the problem you're trying to solve, and then you focus on the integration at the API level, right? And so if you look at a MuleSoft or some of the other companies that do that, you can quickly build up the right solution that you need by selecting smaller, less expensive components and then focusing on the integration of those.
If you were to look at most deals that haven't gotten their technology quite right, can be a number of things, but it sounds like the selection of the tech stack components themselves and how it works as a sort of a unit of technology is flawed to begin with.
Yeah, I would say this. If you look at a PE firm and they're making an investment decision, very rarely are they going to bring to the forefront that that company and its internal operations has selected the best tech stack there is, right? It's going to be something that they assess and based on their own experiences, and they say, this company is in good shape here, or we're going to have to put some dollars into that problem to fix it. There's always a way to fix those things that can be painful. But when you look at an investment decision from a private equity firm, they're much more looking at fundamentals of the core technology, the core value proposition, and how is that going to change the marketplace? Can they achieve that 3x, 5x, 7x investment return that they're looking for? And so having the right tech stack in place, the right tools in place is generally, if you don't have it in place, they'll subtract from the value for it, but they're not going to necessarily give you high marks for or higher valuation for having those tools in place in the first place.
Well, in the last 2 years, things have changed dramatically with emerging technologies to make things even more complex, potentially exciting, but also potentially distracting and also potentially risky. So before we dive into a few specifics, give us your general sense of the emerging universe of machine learning and AI and how private equity can and should be adopting them.
Of course, it's a large question, right? Because AI really is dominating everything that's taking place in the market today. But just a few examples. I think on the one hand, everything we're doing with AI and even Gen AI and language learning models and all these things, they're simply an extension and a growth of where technology has been taking us all along. That is, what doors are open to do interesting tasks or provide better services that we never had before, and how can we do them more cost effectively? And so, if you look at JP3, for example, our systems used a combination of near infrared spectroscopy and chemometrics, two terms that most people aren't familiar with. And we combine them with very sophisticated machine learning algorithms and AI like software to do hypervariate modeling. None of our customers cared about any of those big fancy words. All they cared about was, did we give them correct results of the composition flowing through their pipeline? That's all they cared about. And so I think it's important for PE-backed companies to not lose sight of that. At the end of the day, what your customer wants is, better, faster, cheaper information services products. And if you can use AI-enabled tools to do that, then fantastic. And oftentimes AI can open up those opportunities in ways we haven't seen before. Last year, I was at Dreamforce, the Salesforce annual event, and was able to participate in a small roundtable discussion with Jeffrey Moore from Custom Chasm. And so there were maybe 10 or 15 of us CEOs and CIOs and CTOs in the room. And we were talking about this very question. How has AI and really emerging technologies impacted our operations? For the most part, the answer around the table was they have been impactful as part of a larger system that we have purchased or developed to solve a particular problem, right? So I need routing software to manage my fleet of 5,000 vehicles, right? Or I need an improved work management system or a better way to interface with customers, which is what Salesforce did with Einstein back then. But those are applications where we had a particular problem in the marketplace that we needed to solve. And so we said, well, there's a holistic way to get there. AI is a part of that, but it's not the only way, right? We need all these other customer facing software interfaces. We need people. That's one thing I always like to point out to people, Rob, is that everyone thinks that building the technology and managing the technology is the hard part. It's not. The people are the hard part. People are always the most interesting and challenging part of any organization. At Century, actually, one of the mistakes we made when we first started rolling out SAP and our work management systems is we did not pay close enough attention to change management. And so then when I came in, we actually tapped the brakes. We spent a lot of time in the field to understand their needs and objectives. I'm talking about going out on ride-alongs with the field foremen that were in charge of the linemen pulling electric cable and understanding what does it look like when you're standing in 105-degree heat and you have your PPE on and the sun's shining and you're trying to see what's happening on your laptop. You can't do it. How do we then change those tools to provide something that's better, whether that's screen layout and colors or shades that are built into the iPads, those kinds of things. We actually went so far as to bring in a human factors engineering firm called Jumpseat here in Austin. They actually helped us manipulate and understand those processes better, but also more importantly, they put data behind it, right? So we were able to actually measure the specific amount of time that was saved by implementing these work management tools. And we took 15% off of the time and therefore increased productivity of those field crews by using those human factors engineering tools.
So we know that change is always tricky, and most people are more comfortable with stasis than evolution. And I guess tech is no different, even if it's designed to make their lives easier and more productive and then less monotonous. What do you think the psychology is behind the resistance to adopting tech-specific change?
Yeah, fascinating question. There's several factors at play. And of course, it looks a little different inside of a high growth, fast moving private equity backed technology firm than it does in most companies. In the former, you have folks that are very much willing and able to adopt the latest and greatest tool, try it, see if it works. If it doesn't, break it, we'll move on to the next thing very quickly. But for the most part, I think we have to keep in mind across most industries, you have folks they don't like to get outside their comfort zone. I think there's a psychology of fear. You'll hear it talked about that people are afraid that AI is going to take their job. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think it's much more a fear of, I'm not sure what my job is going to look like tomorrow with these new tools that are in front of me. And that's where I think the being compassionate and showing the folks that are sitting at the desk, entering the information every day, listen, I'm going to make your job 50% more efficient so that you're freed up to do these other tasks that are going to actually add value for you. The way I've said it differently is if I can get a machine and software to come in and do your job as fast as you can and better and more cost effectively, then you shouldn't be doing that job. We should be using you and your human capital to add value in a different way. So I think that's a message that can be conveyed and that can allay some of those concerns.
Yeah, well, I can't think of a single person who'd like to go back in time to faxing and mailing letters as opposed to sending an email. But yeah,
Right.
every emerging tech faces some measure of resistance, and think your point around empathetically helping them understand that adopting and adapting and sort of helping to shift the way they work, as opposed to being worried about whether or not they will be working, is key. Anything else on the people side around change management when it comes to tech evolution?
You can look at a whole host of studies about the differences in generations, but there really is truly a generational difference. If you look at someone in the workplace who's 50 versus someone who's 25, the 25-year-old has grown up with an device in their hands from the day they were born. That means that they're much more not just used to, but expecting technology to be a part and parcel to what they do. So I think you can actually use that to your advantage and have, the younger generation actually helping and training the folks that have been in those industries and doing that work for a long time. Vice versa, the wisdom and experience and all that knowledge that's embedded in the minds of the folks that have been sitting at the accounting desk or running the backhoe or whatever it might be. That information is key to developing those new tools, right? At JP3, we always made sure that we had our software engineers sitting right next to subject matter experts that understood what you're going to do with that data once we generate it. The platforms are much more powerful that way. I think too many software companies make the mistake of developing a tool that is really cool and cutting edge and uses all these great techniques, latest and greatest techniques, and it doesn't actually solve the market problem that the customer wanted. We were very intentional about that early on. We would do wireframes and work with in Tableau and create platforms that were non-functional just to demonstrate capabilities. Take those out to our customers that were already working with us and have face-to-face meetings to understand, is this going to take you where you want to go? What features do you like and not? And that I think is very helpful, again, to make sure that you're always focused on the people and what it is that you're doing to help them be more productive, because people drive profits. At the end of the day, the folks that are doing the work at the CEO level all the way down, it's the people that make the biggest difference.
Whether it's real or not, enjoying a sense of ownership around the fact that change is coming, as opposed to having it be introduced one day, I think is really essential. Any trends or go forward insights? We know you don't have a crystal ball, but where do you see tech heading within private equity backed companies?
AI is getting so much attention right now, along with all things related to sustainability and sort of clean technology. I would say that the opportunities resulting from that are myriad. Here's one example. If you look at what's happening with the need for much larger data centers to run AI, especially Gen AI, and the energy requirements that are then commensurate with that. You have Amazon looking at investing in a portion of dedicated nuclear power from a nuclear power plant next to their data centers. I mean, you have that kind of thinking that's taking place. Tesla obviously has been disruptive along those lines when we think about what does distributed power look like and how do we move that power from a clean energy source to the point of use when that point of use is moving along the highway. To me, those are the interesting questions to think about on the infrastructure side. I saw a graphic from a Microsoft investment leader, and it had 1,000 logos of the startup companies in AI that they were evaluating on a daily basis. So you look at that, it can be overwhelming. And you say, well, we can never go in as an AI company and come up with our own little niche and be successful. You don't have to do that. I think for a private equity backed company in particular, you can say, where is a market space that is traditionally underserved by technology? How can we bring some of these AI tools that are already well developed to the table and build a solution around those tools and what they can do to change that marketplace? And again, because I have an energy background, I'm always looking at the need for 24/7 reliable, clean energy at data centers is only going to continue to grow. And we know that sustainable energy sources can only provide about 50% of that power today. That means that there's a huge opportunity for the natural gas market to, as very, very clean energy, especially with carbon capture enveloped now in those solutions, to have a growth in the natural gas technology industry. It's a great opportunity. I know a number of firms, PE firms, particularly in Dallas, that are looking at just that as a growth driver for them. We can get very focused on the core AI stuff that you read about, but it really has a much broader effect across the entire technology marketplace.
Yeah, it sounds to me like looking across the flywheel of your operation, and there's tech embedded in a lot of it, but there are also linkages that are not tech enabled. And if we all do a little research and dig in, maybe there's something emerging on the AI space that can help bridge the gap and complete that tech wheel, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Awesome. So in conclusion, any parting advice for your typical garden variety private, if there is such a thing, private equity backed CXO who's trying to take their tech platform up a notch?
It's easy to get caught up in the hype of what's the latest and greatest technology and how can we leverage it. Never forget to go old school. One of my favorite stories is when I was a brand new CEO I had co-founded the LED startup Illumitex, and we were looking to raise money. So we followed all the rules from MBA school, and we went through our network and we pitched to all the right folks. And then one day I decided I was going to just do some searching, and I found a firm that we had not met with before. They were on their first fund out of Houston. I didn't know anyone there, and so I cold called them. I literally picked up the phone and made a phone call to their main number. And it just so happened that day that no one else was in the office but one of the senior partners. So he answered the phone, and he and I had a 15-minute conversation. I told him what we were all about. And he said, "Why don't you come to Houston and meet with us in person? I really like what you're saying." And that led to our very first investment of VC dollars, which eventually translated into a $10 million raise from NEA, and we're off to the races. So you never know. Don't be afraid to violate the rules of how you're supposed to do it. Those personal relationships make a big difference. I've learned to trust my instincts, pray for success. My journey has not usually been along pathways that I had foreseen, but it's been amazing. And I've really enjoyed it thus far. Looking forward to see what's next.
Yeah, I guess if I could put a capstone on our conversation, you're in the business of tech enabling human capital. So yeah, let's look at all of the technology avenues to improve our business and drive efficiencies and performance, but in the service of humans doing their job more effectively and more efficiently, and having a key stake in that change management. Well, fantastic, Matt. So thanks for joining. For those that are interested in learning more in the interim period, since Matt has successfully sold his last deal and looking for what's next, he is doing some consulting. And Matt, if people are interested in working with you on an interim basis, how can they find you?
Sure, they can reach me. Find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. You can also reach me at Candellum, M. Thomas at CandellumConsulting.com, CANDALUM consulting.com. Thanks, Rob, for the opportunity to be here today. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Okay, Matt, my pleasure. We'll have to do it again down the road.
Be sure to tune in to our next episode. I'm your host, Rob Huxtable, and thank you for listening to The X Factor.